Hi, I'm Dr. Jill Mann, physical therapist, kinesiologist, and personal trainer. Today I'm here with Dr. Tim Tracy. He's a clinical pharmacologist and an expert in the field of nutritional supplements and natural substances. What can you tell us about carbohydrates as an energy source?
Carbohydrates sometimes get a bad name or a bad rap, but we need them as energy sources. And like anything else, taken in excess, anything cannot be optimal for us. So carbohydrates in the right amounts are critical for the functioning of our bodies. Glucose is one of those carbohydrates, and in fact is the most readily absorbed and readily convertible into energy forms of carbohydrates. Glucose in our body, once it's absorbed through the intestine, into the bloodstream and is taken up into cells, is converted into something called glucose 6-phosphate. This is the form in which glucose is stored within the body for future use. That future use is then in the formation of ATP, which is that energy that muscles and brain and other tissues use as their primary energy source. So glucose to glucose 6-phosphate is why we need carbohydrates to come into our bodies and provide that fuel for functioning. Unfortunately, we don't have an unlimited source of glucose 6-phosphate. Our body can only store so much. Our stores become depleted, particularly during intense exercise or long exercise activities. And so we need to replenish that. And again, glucose being the most optimal for that replenishment. Now, we do sometimes use fructose as a carbohydrate for energy replacement, but fructose requires extra steps in terms of its conversion into energy. So glucose is the most optimal to provide that replenishment of energy stores and maximize that athletic performance.
How do muscles use energy, and what forms of energy do they use?
First, remember that muscles use ATP as their source of energy, just like the brain does for neuronal firing. And primarily, it comes from carbohydrates. Now, unfortunately, we only have about 10 seconds worth of energy usage of ATP in our bodies. And so we really can only go for about 10 seconds with what's naturally stored in the muscles. The next step then to go beyond that is we go to a process called glycolysis. Glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose 6-phosphate, which is the form in which glucose is stored within the cells. So within those cells we have glucose 6-phosphate that then goes on to form ATP, and by breaking that, we then produce the ATP for energy. We have about enough glucose 6-phosphate in our bodies to last about 6 to 8 minutes worth of very intense, very high energy exercise. That's great, except that we also, during that process, build up lactic acid. And we know that lactic acid is what helps contribute to that burn and fatigue you feel in those muscles. And that's why we can't continue to exercise at that very high intensity, very intense exercise for prolonged periods of time. However, many of us are in competitions that may last up to 2 hours, soccer matches, marathons, or certainly for triathletes, even much longer. So at that point, we begin to use a third source of the energy, and that is glycogenolysis, or the breakdown of glycogen, which is the longer-term energy stores in our body. We have about enough glycogen in our bodies to last for about 2 hours of exercise. So during that time, if we can do things to negate or delay the use of glycogen, you see that we have energy for a longer period of time. So if we can deliver glucose so that we keep fueling the body throughout the activity and delay the use of glycogen, then we have more energy and more energy for a longer period of time. This helps keep athletes from hitting the wall, which is really what happens when you run out or use up all of your glycogen. So by restoring energy during the activity, which has been shown to improve performance, we get better performance for a longer period of time.
So what kind of fuels does the body use, and what's the best fuel for maximizing performance?
The body really uses 3 different types of fuels: proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. First, talking about fats and proteins. They're not the most readily available or the first used fuels. We really use them as the final line of fuel when we've exhausted all other energy sources. So the primary fuel for the body, particularly during exercise, is carbohydrates. Of the carbohydrates, glucose is really the most readily available and easiest to use. It's the one that is most easily taken up in the intestine, into the bloodstream, but also the one most readily converted into energy, which is ATP, and what our muscles and our brain neurons use for energy. So carbohydrates really are the preferred and best energy source during exercise, and research has clearly shown that taking carbohydrates during long endurance or an intense activity of exercise results in better performance.
How do carbohydrates influence brain function, and how does brain function impact athletic performance?
Like muscles, the brain needs energy, and its primary source of energy is glucose. The brain, however, is selfish. As a core organ, it tries to protect itself, and as glucose levels go down in the blood, it makes sure that blood flow is maintained to the brain. There's a theory called the selfish brain theory, and research has shown in animals that when that happens and the brain gets low on glucose or low on energy, then it may send signals to the body to say, I'm tired. In athletics, we need to have a sharp mental focus as well as good muscle performance. And so it's critical that we make sure we maintain the glucose levels to the brain as well as to the muscles and the rest of the body.
How does Exercell provide optimum energy to maximize performance?
Fuel for your body must be given in the right amount, at the right time, and to the right part of your body for optimal performance. Exercell has patented and unique characteristics that help to accomplish this. It contains glucose, the most readily absorbable and the most readily convertible form of energy. First, Exercell delivers immediate energy for that immediate need, but also has an extended release characteristic where you get a longer release of glucose, greater energy for increased duration. You can perform longer or need refueling less. Secondly, Exercell is temperature responsive. As we exercise, our core temperature increases, and as it increases, we need more fuel, and Exercell responds to that and releases more glucose to be taken up and deliver that fuel. Finally, Exercell helps keep the glucose molecules near those gateways, transporters that move glucose from the intestine into the bloodstream. It keeps it there longer so you get the maximum benefit and the greatest improvement in exercise performance.
So Dr. Tracy, tell us why it's important to refuel during extended or intense exercise.
During exercise, both our brain and our muscles are using a lot more energy, and so they need to be refueled for maximum performance for that increased energy usage. In our bodies, we use a chemical called ATP as our form of fuel. Unfortunately, we only store about 10 seconds of ATP in our bodies, or enough for about a 100-meter run. After that, our body begins going to other energy sources like the glucose that's stored within cells, but also glycogen stores, which are a more longer-term form of energy in our bodies. If we don't have that energy, we don't have maximum performance. And research has clearly shown that replenishing that energy, particularly in the form of carbohydrates, maximizes performance, so you get the best muscle contraction and the greatest neuronal firing, the muscles and brain both working optimally.
For more, please visit us at exercell.com, and thanks for watching.